from Los Angeles. Next, Rethinking Heroes.
Aha! We're now learning how much women contributed to World War II as we speak with the Library of Congress's Director of Veterans History. That Open Phones Friday, where your voice and your calls are always center stage here on Rethinking Heroes.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
I spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
Wow, I mean, first of all, what a question.
Journalism is about telling the truth, all while ferreting out the bottom line.
I'm a Harrison Hellraiser.
Uh-oh, with me, Cary Harrison, as your guide.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison.
And hello. Just a quick reminder, we are live video streaming through everything with a chip and a signal today. You can listen on the radio, or you can watch this program on YouTube, on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitch, or any number of other video platforms. You see, Rethinking Heroes is bringing brand new game-changing technology to the old radio game, and we're modernizing the experience for you and this station, so that if you get out of your car, you can continue by going to rethinkingheroes.com, and watching or listening to us there, or on any streaming platform with video. Now, let's jump into it, because the more we learn about World War II, the less we remember figures like John Wayne and others who, well, let's just call them, who represent the same old white guys who saved humanity from a bunch of other white guys. Well, we now know it really didn't happen that way. Not at all. That's why we look to the Library of Congress, who has a brand new imperative out there that is such a major game changer.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Well, this Women's History Month, we're shining a spotlight on a truly inspiring story with a special interview from the Library of Congress. We're focusing on the powerful reminder of the contributions that women and minorities have had in the military. Through the Veterans History Project, Monica Mohindra and her team are on a mission to collect, preserve, and share the untold stories of these brave individuals. With us now is Monica Mohindra, Director of the Library of Congress's Veterans History Project, to talk about the women of the 6888 Central Postal Directory Battalion. Well, you're going to want to know what that is. And they were the only all-African-American, all-female unit deployed overseas during World War II.
They were a predominantly Black battalion of the Women's Army Corps, or WACS, that provided much-needed mail to servicemen in the field. And their story is not just history, but it's soon to be a feature film and a Broadway production.
Monica Mohindra, we're glad to have you aboard.
Oh, thanks so much for helping us shine this spotlight.
Well, it's a spotlight that has been slightly less than 1,000 airline landing lamp lumens for too long, and you are now putting it front and center so that we can celebrate the 61% of humankind, women, for giant contributions that have literally changed the world. Can you share with us the inspiration behind Women's History Month, specializing in armed service contributions?
So we are, I think, in complete agreement that we should always listen to women. But at the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, we're taking this month as an opportunity to help us all pause and think about that percentage you just shared. I'll add another one to that. Women comprise 11% of the U.S. veteran population. And according to Pew Research, in the next couple of decades, that's going to grow to about near 20% of the U.S. veterans population. Here at the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, this is a great moment, a great opportunity to pause and think about women's service and that contribution, much like what you all do there, the story of human experience. That's what the Veterans History Project does here at the Library of Congress, but we do it with you and with your listeners to gather those first-person stories of veterans' experience. So now is a great time to pay attention to women, and some special women in particular.
Yeah, and I would guess that that is probably part of what motivated you to focus on this really cool group of women known as the 688th Central Postal Directory Battalion. That was a mouthful. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you chose this group?
Yes, I love to just call them the 688 very affectionately. I love how that rolls off the tongue quite a bit easier. As you mentioned, they were the only all African American, all female unit to be deployed overseas during World War II. And with our over 117,000 individual stories of veterans' experience, both women and men, in the collection existing already, it is hard to stop and pick an individual or a group that really shouts out and says, pay attention to me now because they're all so good. But this unit is really incredible. And as you mentioned, with the upcoming film and the upcoming Broadway, there's a book that's recently been released. We really wanted to take this moment when people would be pausing during this History Month to offer the opportunity for individuals to get right to the women. Through the Library of Congress Veterans History Project, you can go to our website, loc.gov. That's Library of Congress, loc.gov/vets, and you can hear directly from them. We have a new research guide highlighting the first person remembrances of those who for whom we have some of their stories in our collection. There were over 800 of them, and they were aged 17 to 52 when they were deployed. And so we wanted to take this month, this pause, to help people know before all the extra more luminous spotlights came out, how you could get straight to their voices unmediated.
You know, Monica Mohindra, I remember history class when I was in school. I'm not the only one who remembers it. Not what I learned in there, but how I suffered through it. Why? Because they taught me. And then in 1783, on a Thursday at 4 o'clock, George Washington signed a document. Oh, okay. What was it? Shut up. And then I was trying to remember Napoleon in 1800. Are you kidding? None of it relevant, none of it connected to anything that's ever going to be my future, but I had to know it. I had to know it in order to, to get a C+. Remember, just enough dates and times. This is not that.
Yeah.
For people who never fell in love with history in school, what is the purpose of creating these permanent historical archives?
Well, the benefit of the Veterans History Project really starts the moment you sit down or look around and realize that history is happening all the time, including now. And you realize that because as you look around, you see, especially in places like where you are, that service members, veterans, are all around us and among us. They don't necessarily wear a t-shirt or a badge that says so. And when you ask them with the seriousness of purpose, of the idea of being in this collective archive together, if you ask them for their story, the next thing you realize is how their first person experience, their human perspective, what they saw, how they felt, what they ate, what it smelled like, how they kept in touch with their loved ones then, how they keep in touch with the people they served with now, how that connects them to our collective history, as it were, together. But it's all a part of the now, and it's all a part of how we understand how we're also connected to each other. So the importance of this archive is both from that moment of gathering the story, you get it yourself when you do it. You also get it the minute you come to the website and hear the story of someone who maybe served in the same place or the same conflict or did a similar duty to someone that you know. It starts to expand our understanding of what that service looks like and how we're all connected. I hope that answers your question.
Beautifully. We're talking to Veterans History Project Director Monica Mohindra. She's worked for more than 15 years with this project, or the project. She's coordinated major initiatives with members of Congress, the National Museum of the American Indian, the National Endowment for the Humanities, PBS, Ken Burns, the History Channel, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, and the Department of Veterans Affairs. That's on a Thursday. The most meaningful part of her work is helping uncover and shed light on the individual personal stories of U.S. veterans, which we find out are not, once again, the movies of the 1960s. In fact, they're people of color. Mm-hmm. There are different minority groups. Mm-hmm. There's a giant spectrum of participants here that maybe some of us didn't know about.
It's true. When we think, I love how you phrase it, the 1960s, when we hear the word veterans, when they hear the word veteran, we're all a bit clouded by our cultural experience. We might be thinking in our mind's eye, that vision that comes to mind is a movie that we saw, a book that we read, a television show, and that might look like one particular kind of person. And unfortunately, that shorthand that we all create for ourselves in our own minds, that means that sometimes when you ask a group of people in a room, your conference, something like that, family picnic, who here's a veteran? Not everyone will raise their hand. Generally, the women may not raise their hand. You say, who here served for the US military or served the US? Suddenly, more people are raising their hands. And that tells me that you're exactly right about how it's easy for us to overlook what service looks like. It's easy to think it's only those who are in the foxhole or at the front lines or in a particular tip of the spear moment. But service looks like all different kinds of things, and it looks like the rest of the country. And to understand the fullness of our collective history, we need to understand that on a person-by-person basis.
Are women, these women veteran archives, are they limited to just the Army? I know that the 6888 were Army, they were WACs, or can women in all branches of the service contribute, including Air Force or Space Command now?
Absolutely, right? The uniformed services has absolutely expanded. The Veterans History Project, since its inception over 20 years ago, has wanted the stories of all those who served for the U.S. from World War I through the recent conflicts, regardless of branch, gender, background, faith, background. We're looking for all of that, and that's true here with this particular spotlight on women. It is important to recognize during Women's History Month these extraordinary women units from World War II that really helped to be the shoulders that we stand on, all of us, not just women now. You know, as you mentioned, not just the Army, but there were the Navy WAGs, the WASPs, which were the Women Air Force Service pilots, the Women Marines, of course, and the Coast Guard Reservists, known as SPAR, and incredible subunits of women, like the Code Girls, who worked with, there was another nickname affectionately given, the brilliant unit of women who broke codes and dealt with encryption and are really credited with helping us win World War II.
I can imagine that there are people that learn about these things through exhibits like the Library of Congress. Some people are never going to go to the Library of Congress. So I imagine maybe that's why a feature film and a Broadway production are another great way to get across this information that these things exist. Can you tell us a little bit more about the feature film?
We are not directly associated with the feature film, but we did want to take this opportunity while people's eyes might be caught by that, you know, the way it happens, to let people know how they can get at it directly. And they don't have to physically come here to the Library of Congress. We all have that capacity to get to the Library of Congress through the web. So if you go to LOC for libraryofcongress.gov/vets, you can hear directly from the women. You can be inspired by the book or the film or the musical or any materials that may come out associated with that over the next period of time. But you can hear from them. There's a research guide at that web address, loc.gov/vets, which helps pull together all of the collections that the Veterans History Project has of these women so that you can get right to it. You can hear audio, you can see video, you can see, soon we'll have more photographs and letters up because we just got another donation from the daughter of Indiana Hunt Martin, and we're looking for more, but you can get right to them yourself from wherever you are.
Let's just finish up here because this is fascinating. During COVID, I went to Berlin and it was the inauguration of Liberation Route Europe, which was a conglomeration of different European nations creating a sustainable hiking path and highlighting some of the areas where our side, thankfully, was victorious against the Nazis. And there they had the last 5 surviving World War II vets. They were 98. 99, 100, 101. One was Guy Stern that Ken Burns famously used in one of his documentaries. I got a chance to interview all of them. I think Guy may be the only one still alive today. This is just a couple of years ago, but really got firsthand stories of what they went through. And it's so extraordinary because history repeats itself. What they saw is what some people think they're seeing today. And I think that's the second value of you archiving this and making it freely available to the average person, is so that they can maybe use it as a litmus paper to understand their place in the world and where it might be going.
Absolutely. You can get to these collections, whether it's of the 688 or other units from World War II to more recent conflicts. You can understand the scope of the Persian Gulf War. Persian Gulf veterans are now our largest living cohort of veterans. And you can also start to find the common threads between the cohorts. And that's easily done just by sitting down and listening to a few. You don't even need to listen to that many, just 3 or 5 or 10 will really give you a much broadened perspective about our collective history.
Well, we want to thank you so much for coming on today. We've been talking to Veterans History Project Director Monica Mohindra, and she's worked for more than 15 years with the project, coordinated major initiatives with members of Congress, the National Museum of the American Indian, the National Endowment for the Humanities, PBS, Ken Burns, the History Channel, the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I'm smiling now because I could go on for about 4.5 more hours, so we'll just truncate it and say also the Department of Veterans Affairs. The most meaningful part of our work is helping uncover and shed light on the individual personal stories of U.S. veterans. Thank you so much for joining us today.
I really appreciate your time and the spotlight. Thank you.
For those who've never known war, freedom is as fragile as the wings of a butterfly. For those who have, there is nothing in life more valuable. Liberation Route Europe follows the path of our liberators, connecting the milestones of our joint past and present. It takes you on a journey through Europe's contemporary history, knowing that what we do today matters most.
Cary Harrison with you. Many of us enjoyed true World War II series like Band of Brothers or incredible films like Saving Private Ryan. But where do these events really take place? Well, a European nonprofit collective called Liberation Route Europe has created an entire sustainable route for all of us to see with our own eyes. History and the whats and the whys of how we got to where we are today and how history often repeats itself is a form of continuing education, I guess, that certainly cannot be underscored. So let me introduce you to the managing director of Liberation Route Europe, Rémi Pro, try to pronounce that correctly. He's in Belgium. And Rémi, I want to welcome you and thank you for being a co-creator of this brilliant idea.
Well, thank you, Cary, for having me. It's a pleasure to speak to you tonight.
Not kidding when I'm talking about people getting a chance for the first time ever to see these actual routes that our Allied heroes took from London all the way to Berlin.
Indeed, this is our idea that we created about 10 years ago. You have many museums, you have many cemeteries, historical sites that you can visit, and you can visit for a long time now. But our idea was to connect them and to create a route, which we call the Liberation Route Europe. And if you travel through our continent, it's through Europe, you can indeed visit those different sites and follow a trail and hike, take your bike, your car, and so on. And so our job is to connect the dots.
Cary Harrison with you, and we're talking to Rémi Pro, one of the co-creators and managing director of Liberation Route Europe. For the first time ever, we can visit the exact steps, the trails, the routes that the Allies took to vanquish the Nazis. Imagine seeing Normandy, Omaha Beach, or descending into the original Nazi bunkers. And I want to make sure every American has a chance to see their own history, the history of their own grandfathers who fought to keep this country free and which created the brotherhood we now know and depend on between Europe and America.
Absolutely. When we started the project 10 years ago, there was a virtual connection between those sites. But 2 years ago, we had the intention to create a tangible connection between those sites, and we had a partnership with different hiking associations to create and to put together this list of trails that you can follow and hike. We also want in the future to connect cycling routes as well. So as you said, it is fully sustainable, and you can for now travel for about 10,000 kilometers because indeed you have this trail from London to Berlin, but you also have trails in Italy, from Sicily to Milan, or from the French Riviera, Provence, and then all the way up to Germany. So you have many trails across Europe that we're trying to connect.
You know, we all love mystery history, and I travel a lot to find you those hidden stories. So I'm going to create a tour that takes us along this route. So keep an eye and an ear peeled for more information down the road.
I think this is a very unique experience personally. As you said, we all have family more or less connected to this history. And when you go to Omaha Beach or to the Battle of the Bulge sites, or if you go to Berlin, history is there. And you've heard probably a lot about it. You can watch movies, and you mentioned Band of Brothers. But when you have your personal experience of a museum, of a landing beach like Omaha Beach, or a cemetery where you see 10,000 graves in front of you, then you understand better what happened. And that's something that stays with you for a very long time because you include this emotional component. And then you have the history of your country or the history of your continent, as we speak as Europeans. And then you understand better reading about those different perspectives and seeing them in museums that history is not black and white. History is complicated, and what we want to do is to show that complexity, show those different perspectives, so people have a better understanding of what happened 76 years ago and what it means for today. Because behind it, you have a very strong message of peace, of reconciliation, of freedom that we should always care about and defend.
You know, last summer I was in Berlin for the inauguration of Liberation Route Europe and spoke with the few surviving soldiers who were part of the actual liberation. So here we are in Berlin, Germany. Is this the first time you've been back since World War II?
Yes, it is.
And what did you expect when you knew you were coming back to Berlin?
I was very anxious. I didn't know what to expect because my memories that stood with me for so many years were not pleasant ones because I participated in World War II.
But anyway, I was in a good outfit. We had to do what we had to do, and we did it. So. And after the Battle of the Bulge, I'm going through it pretty fast, but it was tough. And we ended up at the Ruhr River in December when the Battle of the Bulge ended, and on Christmas Eve, we were firing. The bridges were out, so they had to build bridges for it. So we were firing our guns, artillery. We had a toad mount about like that, and we had to fire them with artillery to protect them, which we did. And on Christmas Eve, we got an order to stop firing, and they stopped too.
The Germans did.
Yeah. And they started to play Christmas carols. This was one of the greatest moments of my combat. Because we were just sitting there silently, and I was looking at Christmas cards and thinking about home, and they started to play Silent Night, Holy Night. Yeah, man, I was singing right along with them, and so was the guys, And I mean, I didn't hate my enemy. I really didn't. I felt sorry for them because they had to fight. They couldn't say no to Hitler, even though they didn't believe what they were fighting for. At least I believed what I was fighting for.
You know, I think a real take home is that these guys, all hovering around 100 years old, realize that the best thing in the world is peace, not more war. Maybe a great reason for all of us to remember what war looks like so we don't have to repeat it again. I think this brings us closer to the point of peace is good, though sometimes we do have to fight for what's good.
History is not black and white. History is complicated. And what we want to do is to show that complexity, show those different perspectives, so people have a better understanding of what happened 76 years ago and what it means for today. Because behind it, you have a very strong message of peace, of reconciliation, of freedom that we should always care about and defend.
Talking to Remy Pro, Managing Director of Liberation Route Europe. So, Remy, how does the country of Germany feel about this important, possibly awkward reminder?
Well, the German government has been supportive since 2019, and I think this is a very symbolic move from their side because they believe, and that's the case for decades, that they have a responsibility and they should support projects that make sure that people get access to the information learn about World War II, and understand the meaning of war and the consequences of wars. And I think this is very symbolic, very powerful. But indeed, as you said, people on the ground might be a little bit upset about it. But I was very moved when I started to work for this project 10 years ago to realize that actually German people are supporting it fully. They want their perspective to be understood, of course. That for them, 76 years ago, it was not a liberation, but it became later on a liberation because they agreed altogether, and I think 99% of Germans today would say the same thing, that they were liberated from the Nazi oppression. And that is very, very important. And apart from this support from the German government, I think what we show here, it's international cooperation with American colleagues, with European colleagues, Canadian colleagues, to show this sense of unity that we all want to keep this memory alive.
Remy Pro, Managing Director of Liberation Route Europe. What is your favorite portion? You're a true insider.
I'm French, and I did 2 years ago this hike along the coast, and I must say that was absolutely stunning. The views are so beautiful, and it was around the 6th of June. So we were meeting people all the time. We met with lots of veterans, and that was very moving. So I would say Normandy as well is a soft spot for me. And maybe the last one, it's because it's unknown. I think lots of people don't realize that Italy is a very, very interesting battlefield, from Sicily to Milan, Rome, Anzio, Monte Cassino, the Gothic line in Tuscany. You have this very, very deep history that I think most people ignore. And so I would recommend people to travel to Italy for, the normal reasons, the usual reasons, architecture, art, food, and so on, but also to discover the World War II history over there.
From Belgium, that's Remy Pro, Managing Director of Liberation Route Europe. Without him and all of his many supporters, this piece of history might have simply vanished.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Cary Harrison, and it is Rethinking Heroes. Very interesting interview. I was in Berlin, and that was in the end of COVID. There were 5 surviving World War II guys there. Only one is still alive today. He was featured on a Ken Burns documentary on PBS. He is the sole survivor. So the voices you heard, they have now passed. They were the last eyewitnesses, 98 and 102 years old. A movie was made about the story about in World War II, during Christmas, the Germans started singing Christmas carols, and the American troops did too. And that's when the American, as you heard there, had the real epiphany that the American at least was fighting for something he believed in, and the Germans really weren't. A major motion picture was made some years ago with Gary Sinise and a bunch of big stars, big 20th Century Fox production called A Midnight Clear, based on that guy's story. And you heard his voice. He's now gone. We're the only ones that have that interview because I was standing there and asked him about that specific situation. Let's do a movie night together. With KPFK. Let's show that movie, and we'll do that down the road. We'll schedule it, and it'll be virtual. You can watch from home in stereophonic sound, and it will be awesome. So we'll make that happen, and that will be coming up soon. Speaking of coming up, Open Phones Friday, where your voice and your calls are center stage. Whether it's in the whirling madness of elections or creeping fascism, now that Viktor Orban is spending a luxurious weekend with Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago. I mean, who would even be able to make this stuff up? Or just your love life? Why not? It's your microphone. It's your stage. So pick up that phone and call 818-985-5735, and let's get you on the air. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Well, this Women's History Month, we're shining a spotlight.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Your donations and overwhelming support of this listener-sponsored community radio, KPFK. It is the support of listeners like you that keeps this station strong, fiercely independent, and powered by the people. Thank you from all of us at Pacifica Radio's KPFK 90.7
Hi, I'm Sergio Melnichenko with the Global Village. Join me Fridays at 11 a.m. with music from around the world and around the block, as well as some very special interviews. Fridays from 11 to 1 p.m. right here on KPFK Los Angeles 90.7 FM, also streaming on kpfk.org.
Radio station on the left of the dial, KPFK.
Preventing truth decay. Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes reminding you that we are live streaming video on everything with a chip and a signal. We are bringing KPFK into way modern times. I mean, radio's been around since, the 1920s? And it really hasn't changed. We went from AM to FM, then we went to satellite radio, and then we went to streaming radio, but it was still an audio delivered only enterprise. Not anymore. We are live video streaming on 10 different social media platforms as we speak. If you go to the KPFK Facebook page, you will see this as live video. If you go to my YouTube page, you'll see it as live video. In fact, just go to rethinkingheroes.com, rethinkingheroes.com, and you'll be able to see it anywhere. There's links for every single video platform where it's streaming. Why is this cool? Because we rate radio. Radio ratings. How does it work? We rate radio in 15-minute increments. And when I say we, I just mean the industry of radio. I'm just going to pull the curtain behind a little bit, give out the phone numbers too, so you can queue up. This is Open Phone Fridays. Whatever is on your mind. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, 818-985-KPFK. Radio has always been rated in 15-minute increments because the average drive of the average person is about 15 minutes. So you're not going to rate something for an hour if someone's only there for 15 minutes. That doesn't mean that people are listening only for 15 minutes. That means that when Mildred gets in her Plymouth and drives, it takes her about 15 to 20 minutes to get to where she's going. Then she gets out. Then the next 15 minutes, there's that group of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people listening in that 15 minutes. And then that expires. So they're called quarter hours or average quarter hours. And that's why it's done in this way. And my train of thought has totally derailed. I have no idea why I'm telling you about how radio. Oh, that's it. So because you arrive at your, and Bruce will get to you in just a second, because you're listening to radio in 15-minute bite-sized increments, you're forced to leave your car right in the middle of something. With this video streaming that we're now doing on Rethinking Heroes, where you can go to rethinkingheroes.com and catch it on Facebook or anywhere, LinkedIn, it's on, I sound like the former president, LinkedIn, it's on LinkedIn. Yes, it's on there too. You'll be able to walk then with your phone and you can listen to just the audio, or you can watch the glorious Technicolor presentation and see people like Wilbur, the late officer from World War II at 102 years old, telling that story about what it was like to sing Christmas carols with the Germans and how he realized that Americans knew why they were there. The Germans were just following orders, and it really made a difference. Then, of course, became a seminal movie, of which we will do a movie night here on behalf of you. Let's jump to the phones. Let's say hello first to Bruce in Los Angeles. Bruce, welcome to Rethinking Heroes.
Yeah, Cary. I just, appreciate that you're discussing World War II. My father I'm 65 years old. My father was a World War II veteran. I had, an uncle that was involved with the Normandy invasion. And, That's nothing. That's those things are nothing unusual. Millions of Americans were involved with the war effort. I just want to make a point. The fact that the former president had a visitor in the White House, this media dweeb, Fuentes, this kid named Fuentes.
Oh yes, okay.
Who expresses admiration for Adolf Hitler. When I saw this, watching it, and again, as the son of a World War II veteran, and on behalf of everybody who is also, the descendant of World War II veterans, I felt like my head is going to explode. And all these politicians don't speak up about this. It just makes me insane.
I feel your outrage, Bruce. I was in Berlin during the inauguration of Liberation Route Europe. We were also at the very place where the Germans had signed their surrender and a bunch of other things. I witness this, chronicle it, take video of it. I lead tours taking people to Nuremberg, where the Nuremberg trials took place, and we can see the courthouse and read the history. And if you're not doing that actively, which is why we're having this conversation right now, people lose touch with that, and they think it's okay to celebrate Nazis in a former president's house publicly. Like, it doesn't, the real outrage should be in my industry, the media. Why isn't Anderson Cooper taken out in front of CNN in New York City in Columbus Circle and horsewhipped into the streets for not keeping them honest, which is his brand now? I mean, seriously, we don't have a Walter Cronkite anymore. We have no way of understanding, is this acceptable or not, unless some adult with some history, with some understanding of the infrastructure of life and propriety and decent table manners and noblesse oblige points out, that's wrong, Timmy. You're 5 years old. You should know better. Smack. So, interestingly enough, part of this conversation that we're having on a station like this is generally more progressive, is progressives forget that the only reason we're allowed to be progressive is we made it that way. It was not a gift from a government. We made it so that we're able to have this level of conversation. And if we don't protect it, it will be taken away. And I want to thank you, my friend, very much for your call. That opens up a line at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Let's go to Harold in Santa Barbara. Harold, you're on Rethinking Heroes.
I want to thank you for this historical perspective, and it's great that your show is doing this. I, too, am a son of a World War II veteran and many uncles. Unfortunately, I saw a movie called Patton, and when I was in high school, and when it was my time to serve, which I didn't want to do, in Vietnam, I later suffered what my father and my uncle suffered from, that they called it cell shock. So I wish they were alive today to where I could apologize.
It's okay. Okay. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate it very much. Here I'm getting choked up only because I've been there. I went to Normandy last summer because I wanted to see with my own eyes. We lost 60,000 of us there. And we forget today, like we're having a rerun of why it's cool to have Nazis, why it's cool to take away the right for people to vote, African Americans, Latinos, white people if they vote the wrong way, and that it's cool, it's hip, it's neat, it's fun, it's a challenge, and it's so outrageous and disgusting. While standing up and saying this is what real democracy looks like. Real democracy looks like no democracy. And it's Orwell on steroids. It's Huxley in his worst moment in front of his upright royal. Let's jump next to Michael in Los Angeles. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hi, Cary. Thanks for covering this. I had a couple of comments. One was about the first segment about the women, and particularly you were talking about the women during World War II. And I just wanted to point out that women were sort of drafted into industry during World War II as well. That whole Rosie the Riveter image but then they were driven back into the home in the 50s, and and what became known as the feminine mystique. And I think that's an important lesson to today too. That kind of what you were saying, that there's really a social struggle about these issues that, unless we're careful, reaction can get the upper hand again. And then I'll take another comment just on the air. I'll get off the phone. This is kind of scratchy, but I'm curious if the Liberation Trails deal with the fact that a lot of the heaviest lifting about defeating the Nazis came from the Soviet side and from the East, and that there was a big demand to open a second front because they were bearing the brunt of the Nazi onslaught for almost 3 years before the U.S. actually got in, and then we had Normandy. So I'm curious if they have reached out to, Russia and some of the current Eastern countries to do the same thing, because the trail to Berlin came from both sides. That's why the Nazis were defeated. And I'll hang up and let you speak about it.
Thank you, my friend. Very much appreciate the call. And what a great observation. It turns out that the Russians are participating to a small degree, but Liberation Route Europe only happens through funding. And so member countries where World War II battles were fought are kicking in to fund this thing. But it's not in any way to excuse the Russians, but let's just say their appetite is a little less for participating in a Western European sustainable hiking trail thing. Not exactly the flavor of modern day Russia today now, is it? Though Vladimir Putin certainly spent many years in East Germany running the KGB, which there was known as the Stasi, tortured people, tore them apart, murdered them, killed them. So he's not like a big fan of a big kumbaya nature trail with blooming flowers and fizzy drinks. Let's go next to Bill in San Francisco. You're on Rethinking Heroes. Hi, Bill. Hey, Bill. There you go.
Yes. I was going to call the business office, but this has got more interesting discussion here. We have the UN just passed a world policy about psychiatric intervention. You cannot arrest somebody or put somebody in custody or in a hospital, mental hospital, for speaking out the truth or letting the truth be told. And there's so far no crime has been committed. So if you want to check out the UN state world policy on psychiatric intervention, the motive is usually to make money. Okay, look at the Department of State hospitals up in Sacramento. They make like $3.4 billion a year, and the psychiatrist here in California that works for Patton State Hospital makes over $300,000 a year. Okay, now we have our measures. We I went south of the border, and I was kidnapped. Okay, and we may have some. We have our measures with red spray paint and belly because of spikes. And when the money flows in from the lawsuit from the ACLU, because we're
jump in. I appreciate it. It's hard to hear your call, but I just want to thank you so much for calling from San Francisco. As you can see, our signal travels everywhere with a chip and a signal. We have a lot of people calling in who are watching the video simply by going to rethinkingheroes.com. Rethinkingheroes.com. You can catch it on anything with a chip and a signal, plus, of course, your favorite radio station right here, right now. Our number 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. Open phones Friday. Let's go next to Lee in Pasadena, California. Lee, you're on Rethinking Heroes.
Wow, thank you, Cary. I'm the one who emails you now and again, and thank you for having this open air line thing. And the thing that really has me going is that when I raised my arm and gave an oath to our Constitution, I'm getting as choked up as that other fellow. I knew my life was different. I knew I was giving my life to somebody else, that I was going to follow orders no matter what. And so preserve and protect and defend the Constitution, that's really a big deal to me. And I watched our leaders who were under the same oath, and they're doing this cruddy, warring stuff, and it's horrid. And I do a lot of history stuff, and George Washington and Tecumseh Sherman and Ulysses S. Grant and as late as David Eisenhower, they all said the same thing. They said, hey, you want to talk to somebody? You want to go to war? Okay, good. You get your boots on, you get your equipment, and you go fight the war. And that, I'm really stuck with what we did in Vietnam under Johnson's lie. So I just thank you for allowing me to express myself. And I'll tell you, anybody who goes against this Constitution and our ability to free speech and to read and write, they've got a fight on their hands. This soldier is still fighting for that. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend. Appreciate the call very much. That opens up a line at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. It is Open Phones Friday here on Rethinking Heroes. And I did let the guy from San Francisco, I'm just going to let you guys know, let him off a little early because it was going into complete madness. And while I love that, seriously, I really do, it kind of doesn't fit in this format. But I did say, whatever you want to talk about, even your love life. So I have to own that part. But I'm also a listener at the same time I'm talking, and too much crazy. It's just a little too much. I will point out that he was talking about laws that are being made. The Canadians have passed a law in their constitution that says that saying I'm sorry is not an admission of culpability. And the reason they do that is they say, I'm sorry all the time. If you say in the United States, I'm sorry, that means you're admitting to having done wrong, and it is legally accountable. When you're being sued, you could say, well, you apologized. You clearly knew what you did, and you want to make amends. So here's your way, $50 million, whatever. The Canadians now can say, I'm sorry, without legal repercussions. So it's interesting how little bits and pieces are self-correcting, but not without you and me pushing for it. And this is why this matters so much. If our Constitution were really crummy, I don't think you'd have people getting choked up about having sworn an oath to defend it. It's the most extraordinary written instrument of freedoms that mankind has ever known, more so than ancient Greece, more so than Switzerland, where everything is illegal, like flushing a toilet past 10 p.m. Yes, great range of motion, great lifestyle, but you really can't do what you want and say what you want without getting in trouble. Here, you really can. Our First Amendment, my ancestors framed the Constitution and wrote the Declaration of Independence. And part of the First Amendment, which is not something that we're really taught about in school, was the idea of a pressure cooker. That if you simply let people stand out in the middle of the street and scream F you to the king, they're probably not going to do anything about it. They're going to go home and just go back to their lives. But if you never let them complain, the pressure builds, and then they get with their friends, like Jonathan Swift in coffee houses, who wrote Gulliver's Travels. And the next thing you know, there's a movement, and then the movement turns into a thing, and then you storm the Capitol building dressed as an elk. And we all know how that turned out, because every president in the United States now gets one free insurrection, according to this Supreme Court. You get a free insurrection. Now, what we don't know is that per term, per presidency, or just period forever in your life. This is weird and scary. 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. It's Open Phones Friday here on Rethinking Heroes.
Listen, well, it's still legal.
Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
Your used vehicle to KPFK include funding new and existing programming, as well as increasing community awareness. You also benefit by being able to reduce your taxable income. There's no need to deal with the hassles of selling it, and you support public radio in the process. To donate your vehicle, please call 877-KPFK-AUTO. That's 877-KPFK-AUTO.
Support comes from the Soraya, presenting the return of the iconoclastic Chicano performance troupe, Culture Clash. On May 4th, their all-new show, May the 40th Be With You, serves up an explosive cocktail of humor and satirical outrage that dares you not to laugh out loud. California natives Richard Montoya, Rick Salinas, and Herbert Siguenza have profoundly explored the evolution of Latinx culture on stages and screens for 4 decades. More information and tickets at thesoraya.org and kpfk.org.
Hi, this is the Corin Tucker Band, and you're listening to KPFK 90.7 FM Los Angeles, 98.7 FM Santa Barbara, and all over the world at kpfk.org.
Preventing truth decay. Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison. RethinkingHeroes.com.
And it is Rethinking Heroes, RethinkingHeroes.com, where you will see live video streaming on anything with a chip and a signal, even LinkedIn. I say even LinkedIn because you don't think of going there to watch live streaming video. But we're on YouTube. We're on Twitter, formerly known as, well, X, formerly known as Twitter, Twitch even, which is Amazon Prime. It doesn't really matter. We are ubiquitous, bringing this and every radio station into the modern times because they want it. And somebody's got to do it. So here we are at Rethinking Heroes. I also want to acknowledge the great Renee Yaworski, who is our technical director, allowing this video to happen the way that it does, and Gary Baca, of course, at the mothership at KPFK, processing the signals and your calls at 818-985-KPFK. Let's go next to, I believe we have Nancy in Brentwood. You're on Rethinking Heroes.
Hi. My uncle was part of an intelligence during World War II. He just passed away a couple of years ago. He made maps for the bombing missions in Italy, and he was also, I believe, in Yugoslavia for a while. But one comment, and he told me so many stories, but one comment I want to make was that the Russians were attacked by the Nazis big time, and more Russians died than people on the Allied side. They really fought the hard fight. Even though Stalin might have been a jerk, people united around fighting Hitler and getting Hitler out. And perhaps the war might have ended different if the Russians hadn't fought so hard, because they just, they had their own tyrant, but they also wanted to stop the invasion. So I just wanted to say that in for the Russian fighters, as well as my uncle, who, of course, was a part of intelligence. And he drew maps, and therefore he was part of these. He was treated like an officer, even though he wasn't, because of his secret work that he was doing.
Thank you so much, Nancy, and it's great to have women input on this. It's great. So thank you, because we are honoring women's contributions in World War II and beyond, and to today, since you are 61% of the human population. So thank you for showing up for all of us today. That was Barbara. That opens up a line. I think we've got a couple of more minutes at 818-985-KPFK, 818-985-5735. The Russian front, famous as the most horrible place on earth at the time. Why were the Germans going into Russia? And that's not something that we are taught in school. We're just taught the Allies and the Axis. There, end of that. And you're like, what does that mean, Axis? Axles, like on a car? No, Axis. Is that geometry class? Shut up. And so we never really break this down. But the Germans, the Nazis, had this concept called Lebensraum, or living room. And the way to pay back all of the Germans for going along with everything, and they did, let's admit it, we had no idea. We had no idea. As we're living in Bavaria, in Munich, about Dachau. Sure, you drove around a giant camp and there were trains going in and out and people were dying everywhere and trucks were pulling up and arresting our neighbors. But we had no idea. Oh, yes, we did, whoever we are. So as payment, Lebensraum, or living room, meant that each German got what African Americans were promised 150 years ago, a few mules and an acre. Living room was Ukraine. Ukraine, this breadbasket of the world. There's 3 places on the earth, on the planet, 3 or 4, where you can grow crops all year round. Chile, California, Ukraine. Ukraine, you can grow stuff all the time. It is the breadbasket of Europe, as we know, and the Germans were going to take it and give every German their own hectares, which is acres, and they could have their own farms, and they would be growing food for the Third Reich, for the 1,000-year empire. and they would all have a beautiful piece of land, but they had to go take it. And the Russians said no, just as anybody would if you cross their borders. So it's not about Putin not around yet, Stalin not a nice guy. But that was really the plot of the play there. It wasn't like the Germans were bored and wanted to send stuff in every direction for no reason. They had, while a highly mechanized force, certainly limited resources. I think we're actually running out the clock here. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today. And I'm appreciating also this wonderful new technology that we're using that allows us to be able to video stream, and everybody who's helping out. It takes, I think a village is too small, maybe a large urban area like a whole city to pull this stuff off. But it is the now and it is the future. And coming up, I want to do a movie night on behalf of everybody who's listening. We'll make it a free type of thing. If you want to support a cause of your choice, you're welcome to do so during so. But let's do a midnight clear. Let's see what that story was that we heard earlier in the show. If you were listening or not driving at the time or whatevering, you will have heard the voice of a now past World War II veteran who was 102 years old at the time. I interviewed him in Berlin, and it was during the coronavirus. And there's only one of these guys left from the Ritchie Boys. And the Ritchie Boys were Jewish guys that were brought in by the Department of War to interrogate Nazis. Only Jewish guys. And they were called the Ritchie Boys. And the reason was they knew that Jewish guys who were really good interrogators, many of them were lawyers, interrogating Nazis, the Nazis would not only resent it, but buckle under that kind of brilliant pressure. And so many of them the last 5 were alive when I went during the launch of Liberation Route Europe. And it was extraordinary to hear their stories, one of which is that famous Christmas night when the Germans started singing Christmas carols because they needed some glimpse of joy in a truly miserable life. And that's when the American realized that he was at least fighting for a purpose, that the Germans were just following orders. A major motion picture was made with Cary and a bunch of other big stars. I can't remember their names, but we'll do a movie night down the road and I'll let you know. Cary Harrison with you. This is Rethinking Heroes. You can go to rethinkingheroes.com. You can see this video after the fact, and you can always listen and on any streaming podcast platform from Apple to Spotify, 24 hours a day. It is always yours. I want to thank once again the great Renee Yaworski, who I forgot to put in the credits, so I'm doing them verbally this week, and also Gary Baca for having made this thing happen on the radio side of things as we create a giant media kumbaya for you, the most important person in the world, you, the listener.
We are in complete control. Rethinking Heroes with Cary Harrison, rethinkingheroes.com.